The bulldozer's engine roared to life as Sarah watched her dream pool crumble into rubble. Karen stood at the property line, arms crossed, satisfaction gleaming in her eyes. "Some traditions are worth protecting," she called out over the destruction. But Karen had no idea what Sarah had discovered buried in the Homeowner Association archives the night before. Documents that would turn this suburban war into something far more dangerous than either woman could have imagined. Because in Willowbrook Estates, the first crack appeared in Sarah Chen's perfect suburban life on a Tuesday morning in June. When she opened her front door to find Karen Whitmore standing on her doorstep with a manila folder clutched against her chest like armor. "We need to talk," Karen said. Her voice carrying that particular tone, Sarah had learned to dread the one that meant someone was about to explain why she couldn't have something she wanted. Sarah glanced past Karen's shoulder at the construction crew assembling near her backyard. The pool installation was supposed to begin in an hour. She'd been planning this moment for 3 years, saving every penny from her freelance graphic design business, while her ex-husband David fought her on every expense during their bitter divorce proceedings. "If this is about the permits, everything's been approved by the city," Sarah said, keeping her voice level despite the familiar tightness building in her chest. Karen's lips pressed into a thin line. At 53, she carried herself with her platinum blonde hair was pulled back in a severe bun, not a strand out of place despite the humid morning air. "The city doesn't govern." "Neighborhood traditions," Karen replied, opening the folder with practiced precision. Article 7 of the Willowbrook Estates Homeowner Association Covenant clearly states that any exterior modifications must maintain the community's established aesthetic standards. Sarah's hands clenched at her sides. "Karen, I've read the covenant. There's nothing about pools. There doesn't need to be." Karen's voice carried the confidence of someone who'd won this argument before. Willowbrook Estates was founded in 1987 as a family-friendly community centered around shared green spaces and natural beauty. No resident has ever installed a private pool because we understand that it disrupts the communal spirit that makes our neighborhood special. The words hit Sarah like a physical blow, precisely because it felt like the kind of place where her 8-year-old daughter Emma could have a childhood. Filled with summer days and backyard adventures, the pool was supposed to be the centerpiece of that vision, a place where Emma could invite friends over, where Sarah could finally feel like she was giving her daughter something better than the cramped apartment they'd shared after the divorce. "That's not a rule," Sarah said, her voice rising despite her efforts to stay calm. "That's just ... preference." "It's tradition," Karen corrected, her tone growing sharper, and tradition matters. It's what separates a community from a collection of houses. Behind Karen, Sarah could see Mrs. Patterson from across the street pausing her morning walk to watch the confrontation. 2 doors down, Jim Rodriguez had stepped out to retrieve his newspaper, but was clearly listening to every word. The performance was intentional. Karen always made sure to have an audience when she delivered her verdicts. "Look," Sarah tried, again, forcing herself to speak calmly. "I understand you have concerns, but I've followed every legal requirement. The pool company has permits, the design meets all safety standards, and it's being installed entirely within my property lines." Karen's expression didn't change. "The HOA board will be meeting tonight to discuss this matter. I strongly recommend you postpone your installation until we've had a chance to address the community impact." "Community impact?" Sarah's control finally snapped. "It's a pool, Karen, not a nuclear reactor." "It's a precedent," Karen shot back, her voice carrying across the quiet street. "Today, it's your pool. Tomorrow, it's someone else's basketball court. Next week, it's RVs and driveways and chain-link fences. There's a reason property values in Willowbrook Estates have remained stable while other neighborhoods have declined. The implicit threat hung in the air between them. Sarah's house, the first thing she'd ever owned, outright represented everything she'd rebuilt after. David had tried to destroy her credit and her confidence. The thought of anything threatening that stability made her stomach clench with familiar anxiety. "The installation is happening today," Sarah said, surprised by the steadiness in her own voice. "If you want to call a board meeting, that's your right, but I'm not stopping my life because you think pools are somehow un-American." Karen's eyes narrowed. "You're making a mistake. I'm making a choice," Sarah replied. "There's a difference." For a moment, the two women stared at each other. across the invisible line that separated Sarah's property from the sidewalk. Then Karen turned and walked away, her heels clicking against the pavement with military precision. Sarah watched her go, trying to ignore the way her hands were shaking. She'd known this confrontation was coming, had prepared for it during the months of planning and permit applications, but facing Karen's cold certainty had been worse than she'd imagined. The sound of truck engines brought her back to the present. The pool crew was arriving, led by a weathered man in his 50s who introduced himself as Tony. "You ready for this?" he asked, gesturing toward the marked area where the pool would go. Sarah looked at the pristine rectangle of grass that would soon become the focal point of her backyard. Emma had picked out the tile pattern herself, a cheerful blue mosaic that would catch the morning sun. They'd planned pool parties and lazy summer afternoons, imagining a life where their home felt like a sanctuary instead of a battlefield. "Yes," she said, "I'm ready." The excavation began at 9:30. Sarah tried to work from her home office, but the sound of heavy machinery made concentration impossible. By lunch, they dug halfway to the planned depth. Sarah was making sandwiches. For the crew, when her phone rang, "Sarah, this is Janet Morrison from the Homeowner Association Board." The voice was crisp, professional, and entirely unwelcome. "I understand you're proceeding with a pool installation despite concerns raised by other residents." Sarah gripped the phone tighter. "I'm proceeding with a legal home improvement on my own property, of course, and nobody's questioning your legal right to do so. But we'd like to invite you to tonight's emergency board meeting so we can discuss this matter as a community." The word emergency sent a chill down Sarah's spine. What kind of emergency? Well, several residents have expressed concerns about the precedent this sets, and we think it's important to address those concerns before any irreversible changes are made. Sarah could hear the careful legal language the way Janet was trying to sound reasonable while delivering what amounted to a threat. The changes are already being made. The hole is half dug, which is exactly why we need to meet tonight. 7 o'clock at the community center. We're hoping you'll be there. The line went dead before Sarah could respond. She stared at her phone, feeling the walls of her carefully constructed new life beginning to close in around her. Outside, the excavation continued. Tony and his crew worked with the focused efficiency of people who'd done this job 1,000 times before. They had no idea they were digging at the center of a suburban war that was about to escalate far beyond anyone's expectations. At 3 o'clock, Sarah's neighbor, Julie, knocked on the door. A single mother in her early 30s, Julie had been one of the first people to welcome Sarah to the neighborhood when she'd moved in 2 years ago. "I heard about the board meeting," Julie said, glancing nervously toward the construction site. "I wanted you to know that not everyone agrees with Karen." "But you won't say that publicly," Sarah replied, recognizing the familiar look of someone who wanted to help, but wouldn't risk their own position. Julie's silence was answer enough. "I get it," Sarah continued. "Karen's been here longer than anyone. She has influence." "It's not about influence," Julie said quietly. "It's about what happens when you cross her. Ask the Martinez family about their fence dispute, or the Johnsons about their garage sale permit, ending with families either capitulating to Karen's demands or selling their homes and moving away." "So what are you saying?" Sarah asked. "That I should just give up?" "I'm saying be careful," Julie replied. "Karen doesn't just win arguments, she destroys people who oppose her." After Julie left, Sarah stood in her backyard watching the crew work. The pool was taking shape now, the concrete forms creating the outline of what would soon be her daughter's favorite place in the world. Emma was at her father's house this week, but Sarah had already planned to surprise her with the finished pool when she returned. The thought of Emma's face when she saw it gave Sarah the resolve she needed. This wasn't just about a pool, it was about creating a home where her daughter could thrive. Sarah woke to the sound of her phone buzzing incessantly on the nightstand. The clock read 6:47 a.m. too early for any normal call, which meant it was either an emergency or Karen had found a new way to make her life miserable. "Hello," she answered, her voice thick with sleep. "Sarah, it's Tony from the pool crew. We've got a problem." She sat up immediately, fully awake now. Through her bedroom window, she could see the construction site in her backyard, but something was wrong. The careful excavation from yesterday looked ... different. What kind of problem? Someone filled the hole with concrete. The whole thing. It's solid. Sarah's blood turned to ice. What do you mean, filled it? I mean, someone backed up a cement truck in the middle of the night and dumped about 10 yards of concrete right into your excavation. It's going to take us days to jackhammer it out, and that's assuming we can get the equipment back here. Sarah was already pulling on clothes, her hands shaking with rage. Are you sure it was deliberate? Lady, concrete doesn't just fall out of the sky. Someone did this on purpose. She ended the call and rushed outside, still in her pajamas and slippers. The sight that greeted her was devastating. Her beautiful pool excavation, the perfect rectangle that had taken Tony's crew an entire day to dig, was now a smooth gray surface of hardened concrete. Jesus Christ, she whispered, staring at the destruction. Language, Sarah. She spun around to find Karen standing at the property line, dressed in a pristine jogging outfit, as if she'd just happened to be passing by on her morning run. You did this, Sarah said, her voice barely controlled. I did what? Karen's expression was perfectly innocent, but there was a glint of satisfaction in her eyes that made Sarah's stomach turn. You know exactly what you did. I know that I went to bed at 10:30 last night and woke up at 6 for my morning jog. What happened in your backyard is unfortunate, but hardly my responsibility. Sarah wanted to scream, to rush across the grass and grab Karen by her perfectly styled hair. Instead, she forced herself to think clearly. This is destruction of property. It's a crime, is it? Karen tilted her head with mock curiosity. According to what I heard at last night's meeting, several residents were concerned about the safety implications of an open excavation so close to the sidewalk. Someone probably just decided to take action to protect the neighborhood children. The casual way she said "it as if vigilante concrete pouring was just another community service maid. Sarah's hands clenched into fists. This isn't over, Sarah said. Oh, honey, Karen replied, her voice dripping with false sympathy. It hasn't even started. By 8 o'clock, Sarah's backyard was full of people. Tony and his crew had arrived with jackhammers and a small excavator. While Sarah fielded calls from her insurance company and tried to figure out if her homeowner's policy covered malicious concrete dumping, the noise was tremendous, a constant grinding roar that echoed through the neighborhood like a construction site from hell. Sarah could see neighbors gathering on their porches and in their yards, watching the spectacle with expressions ranging from concern to barely concealed amusement. How long is this going to take? She asked Tony during a brief break in the jackhammering. At least 2 days, maybe 3, and that's assuming we don't hit any utilities. This concrete is good quality whoever did this knew what they were doing. Sarah's phone rang again. This time it was Janet Morrison from the HOA board. Sarah, I'm calling about the noise complaints we've been receiving this morning. Noise complaints? Sarah's voice rose an octave. Someone vandalized my property. I understand you're frustrated, but the fact remains that the construction noise is disturbing other residents. We're going to need you to limit the work to reasonable hours. Reasonable hours. It's 8 in the morning. The community quiet hours extend until 9 a.m. on weekdays. You'll need to stop work until then. Sarah stared at her phone in disbelief. You're kidding. I'm afraid not. And Sarah, the board met in emergency session last night after you left. We voted to formally request that you cease the pool installation pending a full community review. What does that mean? It means that while we can't legally stop you from proceeding, we're asking you to be a good neighbor and respect the community's wishes. And if I don't, there was a pause. Then we'll have to consider other options. The line went dead. Sarah stood in her backyard, surrounded by the noise and chaos of the cleanup effort, feeling like she was trapped in some kind of suburban nightmare. Mrs. Chen, one of the workers, approached her, his expression grim. We found something you should see. He led her to the edge of the excavation, where they'd managed to clear away a section of the concrete. Embedded in the hardened surface was a metal sign, the kind used for real estate listings. For sale by owner, it read, with Sarah's phone number printed below in block letters. Someone put this in the wet concrete, the worker explained. It's been there all night. Sarah felt the world tilt around her. The message was clear. Sell your house or face the consequences. Take it out, she said quietly. Get rid of it. The worker nodded and went back to his jackhammer. Sarah pulled out her phone and dialed the police. Officer Martinez arrived. Minutes later, a tired-looking man in his 40s, who clearly didn't want to be mediating suburban disputes, He walked around the concrete-filled excavation, taking notes and photographs with the resigned air of someone who'd seen this kind of thing before. "Any idea who might have done this?" he asked. Sarah glanced toward Karen's house, where she could see her nemesis watching from an upstairs window. "I have suspicions. Suspicions won't hold up in court. Do you have any proof? Security cameras? Witnesses?" "No, but then there's not much I can do. I'll file a report, but unless someone comes forward with evidence, this is going to be tough to prosecute." After he left, Sarah sat on her back porch and tried to process what was happening. This wasn't just about a pool anymore. It was about control, about power, about Karen's determination to maintain her grip on the neighborhood's social order. Her phone buzzed with a text from her ex-husband, David. "Emma's asking about the pool. Should I tell her it's delayed?" Sarah stared at the message, thinking about her daughter's excitement, the way Emma had carefully selected every detail of the pool design. The thought of disappointing her was almost unbearable. "No," she typed back. "Tell her it's a surprise." By noon, the workers had cleared about a third of the concrete. The process was slow, expensive, and allowed exactly the kind of disruption that would turn the entire neighborhood against her. Sarah was making lunch when Julie knocked on the door again. This time, her neighbor looked genuinely distressed. "Sarah, I need to tell you something," Julie said, glancing around nervously. "About last night?" "What about it?" "I saw the concrete truck. Around midnight, it was parked in front of your house for maybe 20 minutes. Sarah's heart raced. "Did you see who was driving it?" "No, but I saw Karen talking to someone in the cab. She was standing right next to the driver's side window." Finally, Sarah grabbed her phone to call Officer Martinez, but Julie caught her arm. "You can't tell anyone I told you this," Julie said urgently. "My son goes to school with Karen's grandson. If she finds out I said anything..." "Julie, this is evidence of a crime, and if I report it, my family becomes Karen's next target. You don't understand what she's capable of." Sarah studied her neighbor's face, seeing real fear in her eyes. "What do you mean?" Julie hesitated, then pulled out her phone and showed Sarah a photo. It was a picture of Julie's car, parked in her driveway with all 4 tires slashed. "This was 3 months ago," Julie explained. "After I complained to the board about Karen's landscaping company working too early in the morning. I couldn't prove it was her, but the message was clear." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. "You think she's been doing this to other people?" "I think Karen Whitmore runs this neighborhood like her personal kingdom, and anyone who challenges her gets reminded of their place." Instead of just focusing on the pool, she decided to research Karen's history with the homeowner association. She started with the HOA documents she'd received when she bought the house. Dry legal language about dues and architectural standards. But buried in the meeting minutes, she found something interesting. A pattern of complaints, disputes, and violations that always seemed to target the same kinds of people. The Martinez family, who'd been forced to remove their fence after Karen claimed it violated setback requirements. The Johnsons, who'd been fined repeatedly for excessive garage sales until they stopped having them altogether. The Patel family, who'd moved away after a year-long battle over their holiday decorations. All of them had been newer residents. All of them had been families with children. And all of them had eventually either capitulated to Karen's demands or left the neighborhood entirely. Sarah was deep in research when her phone rang. It was Emma calling from her father's house. "Mommy, Daddy says you're building me a pool." Sarah's heart clenched. "Hi, sweetheart. How's your week going?" "It's good, but I can't wait to come home and see the pool." "Can we have a pool party? Can I invite Madison and Connor?" "Of course, baby. We'll have the best pool party ever." After she hung up, Sarah sat in H. William Hartley was already waiting when Sarah arrived at the coffee shop, a manila envelope sitting on the table beside his untouched cup. His weathered hands trembled slightly as he opened it, revealing a stack of yellowed photographs and documents. "I've been carrying these for 37 years, he said quietly, waiting for the right moment to use them. Sarah settled into the chair across from him, her nerves on edge after another sleepless night. The surveillance car had returned twice, once at 2 a.m. and again at dawn. Always parking just long enough to be noticed before driving away. "What do you know about Karen?" she asked. William's laugh was bitter. "I know that Karen Whitmore didn't exist until 1987. The woman you're fighting was born Karen Delacroix, and she came to Willowbrook Estates running from something that should have kept her in prison. He slid the first photograph across the table. It showed a younger version of Karen, maybe 20 years old, standing beside a man in a business suit. But this wasn't the polished, controlled woman Sarah knew. This Karen had hollow eyes and bruises barely concealed by makeup. That's her. First husband, Marcus Delacroix, he was a city planning commissioner in Detroit, made a fortune approving construction projects for the right price. Karen was his secretary when they married. Sarah studied the photo. Even young Karen had carried herself with that same rigid posture. But there was something else, a hunted quality that spoke of desperation. What happened to him? House fire, November 1986. Very convenient timing, considering the FBI was about to arrest him for racketeering. William pulled out another documented newspaper clipping with the headline, "City Official Dies in Suspicious Blaze." Karen inherited everything, but she was also a person of interest in the investigation. She disappeared before they could question her properly, and 6 months later, Karen Whitmore bought the first house in Willowbrook Estates with cash. Sarah felt the pieces clicking together. She's been hiding here all this time, more than hiding. She's been building a kingdom where she controls every detail, where nothing happens without her permission. It's the perfect cover for someone who needs to stay invisible. William spread more photographs across the table. Sarah recognized several faces, former neighbors whose families had been driven out of Willowbrook Estates over the years. Every person who's challenged her has discovered the same thing you're learning now. Karen doesn't just win arguments, she destroys lives. But she's always been careful to make it look like community action, legitimate complaints. Until now, Sarah said, thinking of the concrete truck. Until now, William agreed. You're different from the others. You're not backing down, and that's making her desperate. Desperate people make mistakes. Sarah leaned forward. Why are you telling me this? Why now? William's expression darkened. Because Karen Whitmore killed my daughter. The words hit Sarah like a physical blow. She stared at the old man, seeing the pain etched in every line of his face. Her name was Rebecca. She was 26, a social worker who just moved to Willowbrook Estates with her husband. They were the first family to challenge Karen's. Authority wanted to install a playground in the common area. He pulled out a final photograph, a young woman with kind eyes and a bright smile, standing beside a man who was clearly her husband. Karen orchestrated a campaign to have Rebecca fired from her job, claimed she was unstable, had her professional licenses questioned. But Rebecca fought back, started investigating Karen's background. She was getting close to the truth when she had her accident. What kind of accident? Carbon monoxide poisoning, faulty furnace in their basement. The investigation ruled it accidental, but Rebecca had just had her furnace serviced the week before. It was working perfectly. Sarah's blood ran cold. You think Karen murdered her? I know she did, but I could never prove it. Rebecca's husband moved away after the funeral, couldn't bear to stay in the house where she died. I was just a grieving father with theories and no evidence. William reached across the table and gripped Sarah's hand. Don't let her do to you what she did to Rebecca. Don't let her win. Sarah drove home in a daze, the manila envelope containing William's documents sitting on her passenger seat like a bomb waiting to explode. She now understood what she was truly facing, not just a neighborhood bully, but a woman who would commit murder to protect her secrets. The construction crew was waiting in her driveway, looking frustrated and anxious. Mrs. Chen, we've got another problem, Tony said as she got out of her car. Someone called in a complaint about our permits. The city inspector is shutting us down pending a review. Sarah's heart sank. What kind of review? Anonymous tip, claiming we're violating setback requirements, says the excavation is too close to the property line. Tony gestured toward the backyard. It's complete bullshit. We measured everything twice, but we can't work until it's cleared up. Sarah looked at the hole in her backyard, now cleaned of concrete, but still far from finished. Emma would be home tomorrow, expecting to see her surprise pool. How long will the review take? Could be days, could be weeks. Depends on how backed up the city is. After the crew left, Sarah sat in her kitchen and called the city planning office. The conversation was an exercise in bureaucratic frustration forms to fill out, inspections to schedule, appeals processes that could drag on for months. She was still on hold when her doorbell rang. Through the peephole, she saw a woman she didn't recognize, middle-aged, professional-looking, with the kind of smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Mrs. Chen, my name is Patricia Vance. I'm a real estate agent, and I wanted to discuss a potential offer for your property." Sarah opened the door, but didn't invite her in. "I'm not selling. I understand this has been a difficult time for you," Patricia continued, her voice smooth and practiced. "The pool situation, the neighborhood tensions. Sometimes a fresh start is exactly what a family needs. Who sent you?" "I represent some investors who are very interested in properties in this area. They're prepared to make a generous offer well above market value." Sarah felt a chill of recognition. "How generous? $50,000 over your purchase price. Cash offer. Quick closing. You could be moved out by the end of the month." It was tempting, God. It was tempting. Sarah could take the money, find a house in a different neighborhood, give Emma the pool she wanted without all this drama. But then she thought about William Hartley's daughter, about all the other families who'd been driven away, about the pattern of intimidation that had been going on for decades. "I'm not interested," she said firmly. Patricia's smile faltered. "Slightly, Mrs. Chen. I hope you'll reconsider. This neighborhood can be challenging for people who don't fit in. My clients are trying to help you avoid further unpleasantness. Are you threatening me?" "I'm offering you a way out," Patricia replied, "but the offer won't be available indefinitely." After she left, Sarah double-checked her locks and drew the curtains. The surveillance car was back, parked across the street, with the same shadowy figure behind the wheel. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Check your email." Sarah's hands shook as she opened her laptop. The message was from an anonymous account with a video attachment. She clicked play and immediately recognized her own backyard, filmed from the house behind hers. The video showed the concrete truck arriving at midnight, exactly as Julie had described. But it also showed something else: Karen Whitmore standing in the street, directing the operation like a general commanding troops. The timestamp showed it was recorded 3 nights ago. Someone had been watching, documenting Karen's crimes. But who? Sarah was studying the video when her phone rang. It was Julie, and she sounded terrified. "Sarah, you need to get out of your house now." "What? Why?" "I just saw Karen talking to 2 men in a van. They were looking at your house, and she was pointing at your windows." "I think they're planning something." Sarah's pulse raced. "What kind of men?" "I don't know, but they didn't look like they were here to talk." "Sarah, I'm scared for you." Sarah grabbed her keys and headed for the door, but as she reached for the handle, she saw headlights pulling into her driveway. A dark van, exactly as Julie had described. She killed the lights and peered through the window. 2 men got out, large, intimidating figures who moved with the confidence of people accustomed to violence. One carried what looked like a crowbar. Sarah's mind raced. She could call the police, but they would take time to arrive. She could try to slip out the back, but the yard was enclosed by a tall fence. She was trapped. The men were at her front door now, testing the handle. Sarah heard the scrape of metal against wood. They were picking the lock. She grabbed her phone and dialed 911, whispering her address and situation to the dispatcher. Then she retreated to her bedroom, clutching the baseball bat David had left behind. The front door opened with a soft click. Sarah heard footsteps in her living room, muffled voices discussing search patterns. They were being methodical, professional. Her bedroom window faced the backyard, specifically the excavation site, where her pool was supposed to be. In the darkness, it looked like an open grave. Sarah made a decision that would have seemed impossible a week ago. She opened the window and climbed out, dropping the 8 feet to the ground below. The impact jarred her knees, but she stayed quiet and Sarah met William at the county courthouse at 8 a.m. sharp. Both of them flanked by the 2 FBI agents he'd contacted the night before. Special Agent Rebecca Torres, named William, had noted grimly, after his murdered daughter was a woman in her 40s who'd been tracking cold cases involving suspicious deaths in suburban communities. "Mrs. Chen, I want you to understand the gravity of what you're alleging," Agent Torres said as they settled into a conference room. "You're claiming that a pillar of your community is actually a fugitive who's committed multiple murders over 3 decades. I'm claiming that Karen Whitmore is a killer who's been hiding in plain sight," Sarah replied, sliding the video evidence across the table. "And she tried to have me killed last night." Agent Torres watched the concrete truck footage with professional detachment, then studied the photographs William had preserved for over 30 years. Her partner, Agent Chuno, relation to Sarah, despite the name was already on his laptop, cross-referencing Karen's social security number with federal databases. The Karen Whitmore identity was created in March 1987, Agent Chen announced. Before that, there's no record of her existence. But Karen Delacroix's trail goes cold in January 1987, right after the Detroit fire investigation. That's not enough. For an arrest warrant, Agent Torres said, but it's enough to start surveillance. Mrs. Chen, I need you to go back to your normal routine. Can you do that? Sarah's laugh was bitter. My normal routine involves trying not to get murdered by my neighbor. We'll have agents watching your house. If Karen makes another move, we'll be ready. But when they returned to Willowbrook Estates 2 hours later, Sarah's world had changed again. The excavation in her backyard was gone, filled with fresh soil and sod, as if the pool had never been planned. A sign in her front yard read, "Thank you for being a good neighbor." In Karen's distinctive handwriting, Tony and his crew were loading equipment into their trucks. "What the hell is going on?" Sarah demanded. Tony looked embarrassed. "Got a call this morning from your insurance company. They said you'd filed a claim for the concrete damage and decided to abandon the pool project. The check's already been processed. I never filed any claim. Lady, I got paperwork. It's all official." He handed her a folder. "Look, I'm sorry about all this mess, but we're done here." Sarah stared at the document's perfect forgeries that showed her signature, authorizing the restoration of her backyard and the cancellation of the pool project. Someone with serious connections had orchestrated this in a matter of hours. Agent Torres examined the paperwork with growing concern. This level of documentation fraud requires access to multiple government databases. "We're not dealing with a simple neighborhood sociopath anymore." "What do you mean?" Sarah asked. "I mean, Karen Whitmore has resources and contacts we didn't expect. This isn't just about hiding her identity, she's built a network." As if summoned by their conversation, Karen appeared at the property line, dressed impeccably despite the early hour. Her smile was radiant, victorious. "Sarah, I'm so glad you came to your senses," she called out cheerfully. "I know this was a difficult decision, but you'll see this as what's best for everyone." "I didn't make any decision," Sarah shot back. "Oh, but you did. The paperwork is all properly filed. Your insurance company was very understanding about the situation." Karen's eyes found Agent Torres, and her expression shifted slightly. "I don't believe we've met. Are you new to the neighborhood?" FBI Agent Torres said, showing her badge. "We're investigating some irregularities in the area." For just a moment less than a second, Karen's mask slipped. Sarah saw pure calculation in her eyes, the look of a predator reassessing the threat level. "How exciting," Karen said, recovering quickly. "I hope you'll find our community very cooperative. We pride ourselves on being law-abiding citizens." After Karen left, Agent Torres pulled Sarah aside. "She's going to run. Someone with her background and resources won't stick around once law enforcement gets involved." "What does that mean for me?" "It means she'll try to eliminate any evidence of her crimes before she disappears. That includes witnesses." Sarah felt the familiar chill of fear. "How long do I have?" "Not long. She's already moving faster than we expected. The insurance fraud happened overnight, which means she has people in place to handle logistics. Professional people." Agent Chen approached them, his expression grim. "We just got word from Detroit. The Marcus Delacroix case has been reopened based on our inquiry." "If Karen finds out, she already knows," Agent Torres interrupted. "Look." Across the street, Karen was loading suitcases into her car, while 2 men in suits supervised. Not neighbors helping with a vacation, these were professionals with the bearing of private security. "We need to move now," Agent Torres said, reaching for her radio. "All units, suspect is preparing to flee. Move in for questioning." But as the FBI vehicles converged on Karen's house, the scene exploded into chaos. The 2 men with Karen weren't just security, they were armed contractors who'd been waiting for exactly this scenario. Gunfire erupted across the peaceful suburban street. Neighbors screamed and dove for cover as bullets shattered windows and punctured cars. Sarah found herself pressed against her front door, Agent Torres shielding her while Agent Chen coordinated the response. "Stay down," Torres shouted over the noise. "This is what happens when a professional killer gets cornered." Through the chaos, Sarah saw Karen moving with deadly calm toward a black SUV that had appeared at the end of the street. She wasn't. Fleeing in panic, this was an organized extraction, planned and rehearsed. One of Karen's men fell to FBI gunfire, but the other provided covering fire while she reached the vehicle. In the moment before she climbed in, Karen turned and looked directly at Sarah across the war zone that had been Willowbrook Estates. The message in her eyes was clear. This isn't over. The SUV disappeared around the corner as backup units arrived. The battle had lasted less than 3 minutes, but it had transformed the quiet neighborhood into a crime scene that would dominate national news. Agent Torres helped Sarah to her feet, both of them shaking from adrenaline. "Are you hurt?" "No, but she got away. For now, but we've got her real identity, her associates, her methods. She can't hide forever." Sarah looked at her house bullet holes in the siding, windows blown out, her carefully maintained front yard torn up by vehicles and foot traffic. The pool excavation had been the least of her problems. "What happens now?" she asked.
Now we
Dig into every aspect of Karen Delacour's life, every victim, every crime, every connection, and we find her before she establishes a new identity somewhere else. But even as Agent Torres spoke with confidence, Sarah noticed something that made her blood run cold. In the chaos of the gunfight, no one had been watching the back of the neighborhood, and Karen's house, the one she'd supposedly been fleeing from, still had lights on upstairs. Agent Torres, Sarah said quietly, "I don't think she left." "What do you mean?" The extraction was too obvious. Karen's smart she wouldn't run in broad daylight with FBI watching unless she wanted us to think she was running. Agent Torres followed Sarah's gaze to Karen's house. "You think the SUV was a decoy?" "I think Karen Whitmore spent 30 years perfecting the art of misdirection. And I think she's still here." As if to confirm Sarah's suspicions, her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "The pool party is still on. Midnight, come learn." Or Emma learns what happened. To the Hartley girl. Sarah's hands shook as she showed the message to Agent Torres. Karen hadn't fled, she'd gone underground, and now she was playing her final card. "She has surveillance on my ex-husband's house," Sarah realized. "She knows where Emma is." Agent Torres was already on her radio, coordinating protection for Emma and David. But Sarah could see the concern in her face. Karen had just demonstrated resources and connections far beyond what they'd expected. "Mrs. Chen, I need you to understand something," Agent Torres said. "Karen Delacroix isn't just a killer hiding in suburbia. Based on what we've seen today, she's part of something much larger. The professional extraction team, the document fraud, the surveillance network. This has the hallmarks of organized crime or intelligence operations." "Are you saying she's a spy?" "I'm saying she's more dangerous than we thought, and she's not going to stop until she eliminates every threat to whatever operation she's been running here." Sarah looked at her destroyed neighborhood, thinking about all the families who'd been driven away over the years. How many of Karen's victories had actually been intelligence operations? How many of the forced relocations had been about more than just neighborhood control? "The pool was never about neighborhood tradition, was it?" Sarah said. "It was about something else." Agent Torres nodded grimly. "Your excavation must have threatened something she's been protecting. The question is, what's buried in Willowbrook Estates that's worth killing for?" As emergency crews worked to secure the scene, Sarah realized that her fight for a backyard pool had uncovered a conspiracy that went far deeper than suburban politics. Karen Delacroix wasn't just a neighborhood tyrant, she was a professional operative who'd been using Willowbrook Estates as cover for 3 decades, and now, with her operation exposed, she was prepared to eliminate every witness who could connect her to her crimes. At 11:47 p.m., Sarah stood at the edge of her backyard, staring at the freshly sodded ground where her pool excavation had been. The FBI surveillance team was positioned around the perimeter, but Agent Torres had been clear. They couldn't risk Emma's safety by moving too early. "She'll know if we're too close," Torres had warned. "Whatever Karen's been protecting here, she's willing to die for it. That makes her extremely dangerous." Sarah wore a wire and carried a backup transmitter in her shoe, but she felt utterly alone as she waited in the darkness. The neighborhood was eerily quiet. Most residents had evacuated after the afternoon's gunfight, leaving Willowbrook Estates feeling like a ghost town. At exactly midnight, the sprinkler system activated. Not just her sprinkler system, every sprinkler in the neighborhood began running simultaneously, creating a wall of white noise that would mask conversations and interfere with electronic surveillance. It was elegant, professional, and terrifying in its precision. "Very good," came Karen's voice from somewhere in the artificial rain. "You're learning to think tactically." Sarah spun around, but saw nothing except shadows and falling water. "Are you close enough to put a bullet in your head before your FBI friends could react?" Karen's voice seemed to come from multiple directions at once, but that would be wasteful. "We have business to discuss." A spotlight blazed to life from Karen's backyard, illuminating the area where Sarah's pool had been planned. In the harsh white light, Sarah could see that the fresh sod had been pulled back, revealing something that made her heart stop. It wasn't just dirt underneath, it was concrete. Old concrete, stained and cracked, forming what looked like the edge of a much larger structure buried beneath the ground. "Do you know what you almost uncovered?" Karen asked, stepping into the light. She held a pistol casually at her side, but her attention was focused on the exposed concrete. 37 years I've been protecting this secret." Sarah stared. "At the structure, what is it?" "A tomb," Karen said simply. "The final resting place of 16 people who discovered too much about certain government operations in the 1980s. Whistleblowers, journalists, prosecutors, anyone who got too close to the truth about what was really happening in Detroit." The pieces clicked together in Sarah's mind with horrifying clarity. "You weren't just stealing money, you were part of a cover-up. I was part of something much larger than a simple corruption scheme." Karen's voice carried a note of pride. Marcus wasn't just taking bribes to approve construction projects. He was approving the construction of disposal sites for problems the government couldn't solve through legal channels. Sarah felt sick. "You're talking about murder. I'm talking about national security. Do you have any idea how many Soviet agents were operating in Detroit during the Cold War? How many domestic terrorists were planning attacks on American infrastructure?" Karen gestured toward the concrete structure. "This was a solution. This is a mass grave. This is a necessity." Karen's expression hardened. "And it will remain hidden, just as it has for nearly 4 decades. Sarah's mind raced. The wire she wore was recording everything. But would it matter if Karen killed her before the FBI could act? "So you murdered your husband to protect government secrets?" "I eliminated a liability." Marcus was getting sloppy, talking about cutting deals with prosecutors. The fire was ... merciful. Karen's smile was cold and profitable. "His life insurance allowed me to purchase this entire development, ensuring that the burial site would never be disturbed. Until I wanted to dig a pool." "Until you wanted to dig a pool," Karen agreed. "Do you understand now why I couldn't allow that to happen? Why? I'll do whatever it takes to stop it." Sarah thought about Emma, about Agent Torres and her team positioned around the neighborhood, about William Hartley and his murdered daughter. "How many people have you killed to keep this secret?" "As many as necessary." Karen raised the pistol, pointing it directly at Sarah's chest. "Including you." But Sarah had been thinking tactically. Just as Karen had noted, while Karen had been talking, revealing her secrets to someone she planned to kill anyway, Sarah had been studying the concrete structure, the layout of the backyard, the positioning of the sprinklers. "There's one thing you didn't consider," Sarah said. "What's that?" "I'm an engineer." Sarah dove sideways just as Karen fired, the bullet whistling past her ear. But her movement wasn't random. She'd calculated the exact angle needed to reach the main water line that fed the sprinkler system. The shovel she'd hidden earlier that evening, the one Karen hadn't noticed in her focus on the burial site, was exactly where Sarah had left it. She grabbed it and swung hard at the exposed water main, rupturing the high-pressure line. Water exploded from the break with tremendous force, creating chaos and confusion. But more importantly, it began washing away the thin layer of soil that covered the concrete structure, exposing more of the hidden grave. Karen fired again, but the combination of water, darkness, and Sarah's constant movement made her miss. She cursed and tried to follow Sarah's movements, but the spotlight had been knocked askew by the water pressure, creating shifting shadows that provided cover. "FBI, drop your weapon." Agent Torres's voice cut through the noise as the surveillance team moved in, no longer constrained by the need for stealth. But Karen wasn't finished. With the precision of someone who'd planned for this contingency, she pulled out a second device, a small explosive, that she threw toward the exposed concrete structure. If I can't keep it buried, she screamed over the chaos, I'll make sure. It can never be excavated. The explosion was smaller than Sarah had expected, but it achieved Karen's goal. The blast collapsed part of the concrete structure, sealing whatever evidence lay beneath tons of rubble and dirt. In the moment of confusion that followed, Karen made her final play. Instead of trying to escape, she turned the gun on herself. "Karen, don't!" Agent Torres shouted, but it was too late. The gunshot echoed across the flooded battlefield that had once been Sarah's backyard. Karen Della Quatha, woman who'd called herself Karen Whitmore for 37 years, collapsed beside the grave she'd spent decades protecting. In the sudden silence that followed, broken only by the sound of water still gushing from the broken main, Sarah realized she was shaking uncontrollably. Agent Torres reached her first, checking for injuries, while EMTs swarmed the scene. "Are you hurt?" Torres asked. "I don't think so." Sarah looked at Karen's body, feeling a complex mix of relief and horror. "Is it over? The immediate threat?" "Is over," Torres replied. "But this investigation is just beginning." Over the next hour, as emergency crews worked to control the flooding and secure the scene, the true scope of Karen's operation began to emerge. Ground-penetrating radar confirmed the presence of multiple structures beneath Willowbrook Estates, not just the burial site Sarah had uncovered, but an entire network of underground chambers that had been hidden for decades. "How many bodies do you think are down there?" Sarah asked Agent Torres as they watched the forensics team work. "We won't know until we can excavate properly." But based on the size of these structures, Torres paused, studying the radar results. This could be one of the largest undiscovered crime scenes in American history. William Hartley arrived as the sun began to rise, his elderly frame supported by a walker, but his eyes bright with something Sarah recognized as justice long delayed. "Rebecca?" he whispered, staring at the excavation site. She might finally have peace. Agent Chen approached them with a tablet showing preliminary results. "We're finding records in Karen's house that go back to the original Detroit operation. Financial documents, communication logs, what looks like a complete list of ... disposal operations." "Victims," William corrected firmly. "They were victims, not disposals." 3 months later, Sarah stood in her backyard watching a very different kind of excavation. The FBI forensics team had been working methodically through the underground structures, recovering remains and evidence from what the media had dubbed the Willowbrook graves. The investigation had revealed a conspiracy that reached into the highest levels of 1980s intelligence operations, a network of people who'd used the chaos of the Cold War to eliminate inconvenient witnesses and political threats under the guise of national security. Karen's meticulous records had provided evidence that led to indictments of 17 people, including 2 former federal agents and a retired senator. The victims buried beneath Willowbrook Estates numbered 23. With Rebecca Hartley's remains among those recovered and identified, Sarah's phone rang, interrupting her thoughts. It was Emma, calling from her new school. "Mom, are you sure we can't move back? I liked our old house." Sarah smiled, looking at the memorial garden that now occupied most of her backyard. The FBI had finished their excavation, and she'd chosen to transform the space into something beautiful rather than trying to erase what had happened here. "I like our new house better," she said. "And you'll like the pool when it's finished. You're really building a pool. The biggest, most amazing pool you've ever seen, with a slide and everything." After hanging up, Sarah walked through the memorial garden, reading the names carved into the stone markers. 23 people who'd died because they'd asked inconvenient questions or posed threats to powerful people. Th.